Your Phasers 2 podcast and prepare for an intergalactic deep dive into the final frontier of Trek cinema. Join us on our Starship of Scrutiny as we navigate through the highs, the lows, and the Romulan twists of Star Trek Nemesis. From Picard's dashing doppelganger to Data's daring showdown, we'll explore every plot wormhole of this polarizing adventure. So grab your tricorder and a cup of Earl Grey, because this review is about to hit warp speed. That's right, we are back, and we are looking at Star Trek Nemesis. I am your regular host, Captain Mike Wilson, and I am joined by three stalwart adventurers willing to plough the depths of this movie. As always, I'm joined by my faithful number one, DK.
Hello.
How's it going? Okay?
Yeah, not too bad, mate, thanks.
Why have you picked Worf for your avatar?
Well, I feel the dude needs some more screen time after this film.
Yes, I did read Michael Dorn wasn't very happy he got nothing to do. Bless him. And we are joined by two first-time guests to either of our podcasts here. And very happy to invite them both on. So please welcome, first of all, from Sci-Fi Queen's podcast, our very own Sci-Fi Queen, Nita. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah,
it's great to have you here. I know we've been discussing back and forth about you being on a couple of podcasts. So glad to finally get you on board and get chatting about this one. And should be good. And we are also joined for the first time by Justin Avery Smith. Hello, Justin.
Hello there.
That's the wrong franchise.
Yeah. I love them both equally.
Fair enough. So you all ready to start talking Nemesis then?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's do it.
We are going to do, first of all, before we jump into the episode, a little bit of behind-the-scenes information, because we always do. Myself and DK have gathered some bits of information, but I've given him some to read out and me some others within the review. And first of all, he is handling the behind-the-scenes section, as he often does on our Silver Screen podcast. So without any more rambling from me, DK, it's over to you.
Yeah, no worries. Well, obviously, as we know, the film received generally negative reviews, with publications considering it to be the worst in the franchise. The film itself was a box office failure, earning $67 million worldwide against a $60 million budget. Plans for a final film featuring the Next Generation cast were scrapped because of this, and the film series was rebooted instead with Star Trek in 2009, which was a box office success. The television series Star Trek Picard, a continuation of The Next Generation, and Nemesis set 2 decades after the latter at the end of the 24th century, premiered in 2020, obviously. It also wasn't very well loved among the cast, with LeVar Burton and Marina Sirtis speaking unflatteringly of Baird. They were criticising him for not watching any episodes of The Next Generation. Frakes said that if he himself had directed Nemesis, he would have made the film less villain-centric and given more screen time to the regular Next Generation cast. Patrick Stewart later described Nemesis as a pretty weak finale for the Next Generation. It received mixed to negative reviews from critics. Review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a critic rating of 38% based on 170 reviews. This was the second lowest rating behind Trek V: The Final Frontier. On Metacritic, it has a score of 51%. 51? That's quite high. Based on reviews from 29 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Now, midway during shooting, the captain's chair from the bridge set disappeared, apparently stolen. While the film crew scrambled to find a way to work around the problem, the Star Trek Enterprise cast and crew shooting in the sound stages next door, they decided to have a little fun at their franchise mate's expense. Scott Bakula visited Sir Patrick Stewart's trailer to present him with a makeshift wooden replacement chair with the letters KAPTIN painted on it.
I love that story. I had to include that because I can just picture like Scott Bakula hilariously like hee Sir Patrick, here's your new chair.
I didn't know that. Oh wow.
Yeah. Oh man, if only somebody had filmed that. Again, probably more entertaining than part of the movie.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
I'll stop being mean. So as I say, if you are new to us on either of our podcasts, the way that we break our reviews down, just for the purposes of my notes, is to have sections like writing / plot, then acting, directing, VFX and production design, sound and music, and then we move on to our kind of favorite things, our conclusions, etc. at the end. But if the conversation flows a different way, we just go with it. It's not strictly, a rigid format. It's more just to get keep my notes in check, I suppose, more than anything. So I'm going to kick us off by asking about the writing and the plot and talking a little bit about that. And the first thing we probably have to talk about is the Shinzon Picard clone plot idea. So who wants to open us up on that? Do we have any thoughts about that one?
That was a little bit painful. But I think that they needed a villain. They needed to create a villain. They needed to create drama, right? Because the movie starts out with this happy event, which was long coming. Those two needed to be married already, and he needed to take the captain's chair. But so it starts up with this happy event, but in order to create that suspense and that drama, the action that I think that the movie was looking for, they needed something. I think that the clone thing, I had a hard time buying it because there aren't enough interactions with Federation and the Romulans for them to have had time to steal his DNA.
The funny part is that when they try to explain that, I think it's Dr. Crusher says something like, "Oh, they may have cloned him from one of your hair follicles," and I don't really want Picard to just turn around and be like, "What hair?"
Exactly.
just look, giving her the side eye and say, "Are you taking the piss, Beverly?"
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the favorite words to use in any sci-fi film, television show story is the word somehow.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like Tata,
somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah, somehow Palpatine returned. The temporal wake somehow protected us from the changes in the timeline. Somehow the Romulans got your like. It's the favorite word of any.
Somehow is the equivalent to we don't really know, so we making some stuff up.
Yes.
It's the equivalent to Doctor Who saying "I'll explain later," basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He never does.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes.
It seemed like a throwaway thing, and I was like, well, they've had contact with enough Romulans that they might have, I don't know, come across a loose hair or something. I guess, I don't know. Or I don't know, maybe the Starfleet insists on you having DNA on file and they hack the record or something, I guess. I can handle by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say I'm of the opinion camp person. Like, it doesn't, for me, it's not so much how it happened. It's more like what the characters do after it does and their response. Like, because that's what we get to see. That's what the movie should focus around, and I know a lot of people have said, and I understand that how tired this movie feels because we have had clones before. We had Thomas Riker, we had the evil Kirk and the enemy within. So it's not exactly new or fresh for Trek, which is ironic considering this was meant to be a breath of fresh air, given the talent that they brought in. I mean, it still blows my mind that the script was written by the same dude who gave us Gladiator, The Aviator, and Skyfall.
That was also co-written by Brent Spiner, to be fair. So.
Yeah, well, I think he got that story credit because he's like, I want Data to die, and that was basically just like as far as did he actually write any of the dialogue or the lines?
I'm pretty sure he wrote most of the Data B4 plotline. I'm blaming him for it anyway. So.
Considering there was there wasn't much going into it with the number of writers, it feels very much at times like it's written by a committee.
Right? Yeah, it does.
Ironically enough, John Logan is meant to be a really big Star Trek fan because there's so many things in here that seem antithetical to Star Trek as an idea. Again, I don't want to get too far into it ahead of time, but I don't know, just jumping into things that don't feel like Star Trek and seeming like you're fighting against the franchise.
To me, it just feels like there's way too much going on. It's almost like they're throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. You've got your Khan type character, you've got a sort of Genesis device type of MacGuffin, another Data brother, you've got a retread of certain Next Generation episodes, you've got death of characters, Wrath of Khan. Oh, look, here's, Shinzon feeling rough, you can tell by his doubling over. Everything just seems to be happening, or everything at once. It doesn't come across. I mean, don't get me wrong, I kind of like the clone subplot, but in this, to me anyway, it feels like kind of a lazy version of trying to get an emotional connection from viewers by retconning a kind of Khan-type character into this. I mean, Khan earned his place, and for want of a better term, the other villains in the movies kind of earned their place. This kind of just feels like a shameful retcon for the sake of having an antagonist.
It feels like a bit of a shortcut, you're right about that, and because you have to have that connection to Picard, which obviously, like you say, in the previous movies, you had that. In here, it really does just feel like the only connection is it's a clone of you. Oh, and by the way, he's also made by the Romulans and connected to the Remans and stuff. Why? Just cause script says so. Do you know what I mean? It just feels like. And for me, the worst part about it is like the villain motivation is just so lazy, because it seems like it's going to start off quite interesting with like, we're here to try and make peace. It's what we're gonna do, and there's a little bit of intrigue there. And then just out of nowhere, about halfway through, he's just like, nah, forget it. We're just going to blow up Earth again. No reason, but why not?
I think the intrigue, any kind of intrigue, it seems very clunky on the part of the director, because there are scenes where if just the scenes were kind of swapped over, it would work a lot better. So that when Shinzon does inevitably, do his heel turn, I mean, you're going to see it coming no matter what. But at least it would kind of wrong foot the audience a little more had you got these scenes swapped over instead of. I don't know, it almost feels like Shinzon's there twirling his moustache right from the start.
It's true. And I like Shinzon, the idea, the concept, like, but I feel like they could have written him a bit better, like less creepy. Like he was a creeper. That whole thing with "let me touch your hair." No, who does that? Who goes around just going to strange women you don't know? Let me touch your hair. Are you trying to get your hand cut off? Like he was a creeper.
This was one thing I wanted to. One thing I wanted to mention is that we had a guest on at one point, and I do apologize to whoever it was because I've forgotten to credit them. But we had a guest on that was like, I rewrote Star Trek Nemesis, and it would be so much more interesting instead of using Shinzon and B4. You can kind of keep the same exact plot, but use Lore and use Thomas Riker. And that makes the kind of being obsessed with Deanna thing also make a heck of a lot more sense.
Absolutely. It would have made way more sense.
Yeah, I'm amazed because, you think about that, literally just changing who the characters are, just like completely puts it. Because I was going to say, because Wrath of Khan does have a lot of moving parts to it as well. It's got, Kirk having, been an admiral and growing older, and you've got Genesis and you've got Khan, but because it's all refined and held together by this theme and with the character development, it works. Whereas Nemesis, everything is a little bit more disconnected, so that's why it doesn't work as well, because it doesn't because the plot points and the story beats don't play off of each other the way they do in Wrath of Khan.
They could have kept the whole concept of a clone and even Shinzon, but there were just certain things about his character they could have just edited that out and not written that particular part of him, because it really didn't make sense.
I mean, to be fair to the movie and to a point that DK was, I think, making, there are individual scenes that are not, not the overall whole, but individual parts of it that I think really do work. And a lot of the time, if it's Patrick Stewart and Tom Hardy doing scenes together, for the most part, they're actually really good and interesting and intriguing, and they're playing off each other well. Until, of course, it gets ridiculous and Tom Hardy's face is all green and melty, and he starts overacting and pulling himself off.
Tom Hardy did a really good job of playing a part because he's kind of playing a part of a character that already exists, that still exists. He's in front of the character that exists, yet he can't really play him the way we know Picard, because his life experience was different. So it has created this whole new different type of Picard, so to speak. And I think he did a good job. And I can kind of also see Picard sort of looking like him when he was younger. Like, I think visually they did a good job.
Sorry, I wasn't laughing at you. It was just DK mentioned earlier the idea that like Picard's hair fell out twice.
Yeah. When he shows her the photo and he says, "Remember him?" And like you're saying, he says, "You should say, not unless your hair fell out twice." No.
Yes, that's exactly it.
I was saying, like, she should have responded, wow, this would have had so much more impact if we'd seen Tom Hardy in picture form before he was revealed. Like, they reveal him through the lights on the Romulan ship at the start, and we're all meant to be like, oh, gasp, it's Picard, and we have no connection since it's clearly a different actor. If they'd shown the photo first and been like, oh, remember me when I was younger, then we'd met Tom Hardy, then we could have been like, oh, gasp, it's young Picard.
Yes. But, I didn't get the whole gasping in the beginning and why they were all looking creeped out until they speak to Beverly, because I was like, I don't understand because you don't have a visual image of Picard as younger. So that I 100% agree with that. They should have had him reminiscing in his room or something. I don't know.
For one thing, I was just going to say, it's storytelling 101. Yeah, set up, payoff, where if you set up, showing Picard what he looked like when he was younger, then that is paid off when you see, oh, not only is young Picard, quote unquote, in this movie, but he's evil or something like that, which that would, make it pay off, way more, which it's very clear also to me that, no pun intended, John Logan and Stuart Baird were not on the same page.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely, because it does feel, like I said, just jarringly different. But I also, just as a final point from me, as I say, what I was referring to with the motivation is, it just seems like they set up a really interesting motivational backstory, but it all basically involves how terribly he was treated, Shinzon, by the Romulans. And yet, out of nowhere, like I said, this heel turn happens, and it's just like, well, I've taken over Romulus and befriended the Romulans, so I'm going to go and destroy Earth. And you're just like, but they did nothing to you, dude. I mean, there's no reason for this other than we need a final act threat to the Earth. You know what I mean? It's like, it bugs me.
Now, let me ask you guys a question. Do you think they should have addressed that whole, there's a Romulan raised by Reman now in charge of the Romulan Senate? Like, there's no Romulan in charge of Romulans? They never really truly addressed that. And that kind of felt like,
They did have a Romulan in charge. It was Jim from Neighbours, but he got melted by Toleron radiation.
He was melted, so he don't count. I mean, really.
You would have thought there would have been some...
wicked witch, you don't count.
You would have thought there'd been some blowback to this kid.
Apparently
this
you can
clone
just assassinate
kid
the entire Senate and then stomp in and be like, now I'm in charge.
And the thing is that doesn't the Federation, I don't know, take issue with that? You think Picard as a diplomat be like, I think we need to first discuss how you became leader. I mean, rumors are that they all got melted, so what's happening? Like, did they not know about it? Is it that secretive?
They need the whole Thaleron radiation MacGuffin because you needed a super weapon, the equivalent of, as DK said, of like the Genesis device or something that you could have Data sacrifice himself to stop, and that's the ultimate big threat. And it's just, it's just lazy, really, because it just feels like, how did he get this weapon? And there's a lot of stuff like that, like when they mention, the scimitar, it's a massive, hugely powerful cloak ship that he just constructed behind the Romulans' back.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is like, it's almost like a kid in the playground designing ships. We get it, it's big and tough, it's got all these phaser banks, it's got 22 photon torpedo bays. I was expecting them to go, it's also got an EMP generator, custom pie thrower, and, maybe a big boot that comes out the bottom Looney Tunes Acme style and kicks other ships across the galaxy. It just kind of screams desperation, like a lot of this script to me.
I'm going to defend it because I quite like the design of the scimitar. And I will say it's at least more restrained than Picard Season 3 when they find that ship and it's like, it's got every weapon known to man and a few we've never heard of.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm with you, Michael. Yeah. That was a bit much in Picard. Yeah. And when you are dealing with a weapon that's considered a weapon of mass destruction, so to speak, you kind of expect it to kind of come with this ominous big kind of ship, right? Yeah. So that made sense. But they felt like they didn't overdo it, which was good. Like one big giant weapon was enough.
Yeah, my issue is more, like I said, the idea that they're so under the Romulan's thumb, they've been horribly abused, they're working 24/7 in the mines, but he's able to create this massive, hugely overpowered ship and nobody noticed.
Exactly. How did they do this? Like,
yeah, interesting. That is one thing I do credit where it is due about this movie. One thing I do like is that when we get the Battle of the Basin Rift, is that, seeing basically, the Enterprise just take like pummel after pummel, and they're throwing everything, all the usual, fire phasers and torpedoes, and it just like does nothing. And just
I love that too.
Yeah, exactly. And so that basically Picard is left with no option but a collision course, which I don't think it's been threatened with a bunch of times in Star Trek, but usually either it doesn't have to happen or it doesn't hold, like in Year of Hell on Voyager. So that I actually do like, and is something that works in this movie. But
agreed.
I definitely agree with you on that.
I think the fact that the Enterprise got just beat up, I thought it was excellent because this thing was massive. you know.
Yeah, but not to be like really nitpicky and nerdy and just negative all the time. But my issue with that again is that just it reeks of just we're about to rendezvous with the fleet. Oh no, we've been ambushed because we can't afford an entire fleet.
Yeah.
Shush. We're fighting them one-on-one. Why? Can the fleet not come here? Shh. Our CGI budget's been blown. We've got the ships ramming each other. That's all we can afford.
Oh yeah, I guess it makes you think of. I remember I think it was YouTuber. I think his name is Steve Shives, who called this movie "Insurrection" without the jokes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because it's the same thing when the Enterprise with Riker and they're trying to contact Starfleet about the Sona and the Baku, where it's the same thing. It's a battle in a rift where they can't contact Starfleet, and
Exactly.
Except
with all the technology in the world, and communications tend to fail rapidly, like all the time.
It's like a cell phone in a horror movie.
Yes.
Yeah. And I did write as well, to your point, DK, that again it's just Wrath of Khan. Just call the Bassan Rift the Mutara Nebula. It's exactly the same battle. There's a convenient spatial anomaly that's going to block our sensors and communication. And we've kind of started to touch on it a little bit, but I kind of have to mention, and again, we've talked about this on a previous episode under the hit or miss section, DK, but what does everybody think about the Nosfer Remans, the vampire species that we finally meet, and for some reason they look like monsters? Justin, I'll come to you first on this, because DK and I have mentioned this a previous point.
Yeah, it's very weird. I'm personally conflicted because they, I mean, like I said, it's very. I mean, I understand what they're going for because they are kind of like vampires because they're in the dark all the time, but they also look way creepier than your average Star Trek alien. But also the fact, they were lucky enough to land Rob Perlman for this, who was I think I think that in and of itself is also an up for this, is that they managed to get Rob Perlman in a Star Trek movie. That's still
but they wasted him.
Yeah, I know. I mean, better than nothing, but but still, I'm like a lot of this movie personally, it's kind of like I'm almost at net zero, because it seems like there, for every thing there is to admire about it, there's one thing that it's oh, why? Because again, it seems overly creepy to and then, which I understand they're meant to be the bad guys, but it seems like it belongs in a Guillermo del Toro movie instead.
Agreed. Yeah, I think they went overboard with the Reman look. They did. I get that they wanted to make them look alien-like, right? And Star Trek is not without its aliens. You've got Bolians and Klingons and Romulans and Vulcans, but these people are, in a way, related to Romulans, sort of, right? Because they've been with them for a long time. There's got to be a little colonization going on. So that DNA had to be a little bit mixed in there. So I'm thinking, why so vampirically looking? Are you trying to... What are you saying? Because they were forced to live on the dark side of the moon. They were forced to work the mines. So I can understand making them look rough, but the vampire kind of creepiness of them, I think it was really just meant to make them more ominous.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I don't buy for one second that, the Romulans could mutate into that severely just because they're in the dark. It's
exactly. I don't think that's how evolution works.
No, it's really not. And somebody mentioned, I think, one of our guests when we talked about it on the hit or miss section earlier, they said that it kills all tension because in the film you've kind of got Romulans and the intrigue and everything. And the second the Remans appear on screen, you're in no doubt who the villain is because they look like monsters. Yes. So as soon as you see them, you're like, well, they're the villains, clearly.
Yes.
It's completely, it's telling the audience about the bomb under the table, basically.
Exactly, agreed.
But there's no real delving into it. Yes, they touch upon the slavery on, Remus and things like that. But if they had played them more Romulan rather than just the vampiric monsters, you could have had this whole dynamic that said, we're wanting to free the Romulan Empire, as it were. We're wanting them to not be as so secretive, as so distrusting. We want this actual peace, and you would believe them a hell of a lot more than what's being thrown at you.
That's what I mean. It could have been a lot more interesting because the audience would be left in doubt about, like, well, who are the real bad guys here? Is it the Remans or is it the Romulans that have mistreated them? But that was another note that I made, was like the movie goes to pains to point out how the Romulans definitely did mistreat the Remans. There's no doubt about that. They were treated like crap. They were responsible for like Shinzon's abuse and breaking his jaw and whatever else. Then at the end of the movie, it's kind of like, but the Romulans are our friends. The Remans clearly deserved it. And it's just kind of like, what? What are we doing?
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, that's so much like, it's not a good look on the movie's part when I personally, as a viewer, have to actively remind myself that Romulans and Remans are kind of meant to be like almost like two sides of the same coin, almost. Whereas, or maybe not, you know what I mean, like, or like a reflection, or like different. But like instead, they look like they're from two different planets. Completely.
And I think that they kind of the fact that they do this overshadows the fact that they were victims of slavery.
Yeah.
The real, I mean, so the question is, who truly is the bad guy? Yes, they're bad. They're doing something bad. But who is making it so that they're that angry? Had they not been slaves, would they be that kind of a people? And you know, because slavery leaves so many different kinds of emotions, and revenge and anger is one of them, you know. You can't really blame someone who's been enslaved, so want to slice your neck open, you know.
This is what I mean about the scene. Like, I really love the scene because of the kind of the optimistic Trekkie within me. I do kind of love it when Donatra hails and she's like, "You've made a friend in the Romulan Empire, the first of many." But
yes,
really,
agreed.
Picard's response should have been, "I'm very grateful, but we really need to talk about how you treat the Remans before we can make peace," you know?
I mean, like,
it is all very clunky. It is like they've just tried to put as much into the script as possible, and none of it kind of works.
Yeah. Brings me to my next point, speaking of divisive things. The buggy chase.
Oh God! Oh right! Oh yeah! Right. Why is it? Why did it look like someone rubbed Vaseline on the lens?
Yeah.
Because Stuart Baird was auditioning to direct the next Mad Max film.
It looks like a Soundgarden video.
It looks like so many things that it is like, I don't think this is a hot take, but it's literally the least Trek looking thing in a single Trek movie.
Yeah, and I mean, I had issue for a while about, like, why are we using a buggy when we've got like anti-gravity tech and stuff? It's very un-Star Trek, and it clearly is just like, we need an action scene. And then I caught onto the line about they're a pre-warp civilization, and I was like, oh, okay, that's fair enough. They have to use. And then it occurred to me, no, they've got this shuttle just hovering right nearby it anyway. You know, they're shooting phasers left and right. They're picking up a Soon-type android. They've already infected this pre-warp planet. Using a buggy isn't going to help.
This movie never abides by its own logic.
Exactly, yeah. But the other
But
thing
that
about
goes to show you how the writing was done by someone who, I don't care how much he professes to be a Trekkie, really has not watched enough Trek to understand it. Because I'm with you, Michael. The buggy, really, they could have, like, I didn't understand. I'm like, that's the kind of stuff we have now. Like, I thought they were gonna, when he said, "Oh yeah, you know, they're gonna go down," I thought I was gonna see something space agey. You know? Maybe that hovers low, but fly.
Then they pushed out an ATV.
It's an ATV. Like, how traitor trash is that? Like,
exactly.
I don't understand.
What's even worse for me, though, is like, and again, it's indicative of just why do these things happen, because the scripts say they do. There's no motivational reason for the inhabitants of the planet to suddenly attack them. And no motivation is given for it. And Picard, Mr. Diplomacy, takes one look at this pre-warp civilization attacking them and says, "Mr. Worf, bust out the phaser cannon." It's just like, what are we doing here? Everybody's completely out of character. Nothing makes any sense. It's just like, we need an action scene.
It is so not, Federation code for them to be doing that. Like, they should have just ran out of there, And honestly, if they would have just went down, like being down, and quietly picked up the pieces and left, that is you not infecting the planet. But you go in there with the ATV, making all that noise and ruckus.
At least give us a reason. Like, why are they chasing after them? Do they want the android? Because it was there the whole time, so they don't seem to. And they don't necessarily have any reason to think of you as an enemy. they just kind of attacked. And like I said, it's just completely ridiculous that the response to that from any Starfleet officer would be, let's pull out the big cannon on the truck and shoot at them then.
I think there was this desperate need, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but there was this desperate need to make it an action film.
Yeah.
100%.
You know, and there's nothing wrong with action. I love action, right?
Yeah.
But I think that when it comes to Star Trek, there has to be more science and less action. And it has to kind of be like maybe a 50-50, right? And I liked the movie. There was a lot of points to this movie that I enjoyed that they could have done so much more with, you know? But I can definitely sit back and objectively see why this movie didn't do as well as the others.
Yeah.
And to Justin's point, and to be positive for a second, there's action in the movie that really works. Like the space battle at the end of the movie is very effective and works really well.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I will say, like, I'm not sure if I said this yet, but it's been a thought that's been on my mind for a while. Which for me, whenever I see this movie, I feel like I see two movies. Like, there's the movie I'm watching, and also the movie it could have been.
Agreed.
Yeah, because
I'm with you, Justin.
Yeah, exactly. Because you see all the behind the scenes, and it's all the deleted scenes, and they're all much more character focused. And I love, like, there's one where Worf, like, basically before they go to, like, Remus, where, like, Worf says to Picard something like, "Oh, like, be careful, we should have raised because the Romulans can't be trusted." But that's not in the theatrical cut. So Worf just kind of says out of hand, the Romulans fought with honor, and you know, which I think that alone would have given, like, just those two lines would have given Worf, like, at least a bit of an arc in this movie, and, like, maybe have given a little bit more of a dimension to the Romulans, because as we know, like, it's not explored in this movie, at least, and it could have been, is, you know, Worf's implicit distrust of the Romulans, because they're the ones who killed his parents, and but that's not explored, you know, like, at all, like everything else.
Worf did get to be comedy drunk at the start in the wedding. That's as much as he got to do.
Make a disparaging remark about Irving Berlin.
Exactly. Which is just saying his name, apparently.
Yes. Well, that's Worf. I did not like the Donatra and Shinzon scene.
I hate that scene.
That
passion.
What
was that?
Yeah, was she trying to come on to him? And he was like, ew, no, I'm not having that.
It's like he was attempting to be sexy, but it was just cringe. You almost saw Kenneth Williams in the background with the double entendres. It was terrible.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's how deep does it go? Oh God, shut up, please. Get to the next scene.
This is where I disagree so much with people, because everyone says, like, Tom Hardy's not bad in this, and I'm like, I think he's terrible. No disrespect to the man, he got a lot better, and, you know, apparently he took acting lessons and was really upset with the response to this film. But, like, in that scene with Donatra when he's like, "Oh, Commander, one more thing, if you ever touch me again, I'll kill you." It's like,
yeah, so much so he actually filmed the same film later on under Christopher Nolan.
Oh God,
yeah. Shinzon and Bane really are just the same character.
But here's my question: was Tom Hardy bad, or was his writing that
I do blame a lot of it to the writing and direction. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I realize it's like the same problem that plagues like the Star Wars prequels, where you've got like a director, you know, where of course George Lucas created something amazing, no doubting that, but everyone will tell you he's not great at directing actors. He's not great at writing like personable dialogue. And when you've got, you know, the 20-something Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman who are not going to question, you know, Mr. Big George Lucas man when they're just up and comers, it's the same exact thing where Stuart Baird and, you know, not a great director, Tom Hardy, young man hoping to prove himself. So of course there's going to be a weird, awkward, like, you know,
sand. It gets everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like honestly, that's all Tom Hardy was missing, was just being like, or yeah, that's all they should. The only thing missing from that scene between him and Donatra was like, "Oh, you call this a diplomatic solution?" No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
Before we put all the blame on George Lucas, I just want to remind you again: somehow Palpatine returned.
Oh yeah, no, I hate.
I mean, come on, that's J.J. Abrams. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
I hate you, J.J. Abrams, so much.
This movie had so many good elements, so many good little tiny storylines within it, and good ideas. You know, so I'll never ever say it was bad, but was it good? Good? Was it on my top? There was elements that I felt were necessary, and I was excited about the movie. That I said,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, great! I'm glad they did this finally."
Absolutely.
You know
I don't think it's like irredeemable or fully
exactly.
unwatchable. And like I said, there's things that even I can admit, like the Picard and Shinzon scenes,
Hmm.
during the ready room scenes and the hologram scene and everything, very well acted and really well done. Like I said, the space fight at the end between the Enterprise and the Scimitar is incredible. It's almost worth, especially,
Yeah.
when I saw this on the big screen, I came out feeling mainly disappointed, but also thinking at least I got to see that really cool space battle on the big
Yeah.
screen, which was cool.
There are aspects of it that I really like. I mean, it's not entirely, to me, it's not entirely awful. It just, there's something not connecting. And I'm putting that down to Baird and the script. It's
Yeah.
there's something missing. I mean, to paraphrase, the great Eric Morecambe, it is playing all the right notes, just not necessarily in the right order.
It's a good
Correct.
way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it just even minor things, and I know I'm probably the only one, but that little scene where B-Force petting Spot, and then suddenly, his switch is flipped to evil, and he heads to the computer. To me, there was no need for that little. You could have just shown him at the computer, not that kind of heel turn. That bugs me. That.
Yeah, but that was what I was going to bring up. The last thing about the specific writing is the B4 plot, which reeks to me of Brent Spiner wanting to write himself a Wrath of Khan Spock moment and damn the logic, basically. Because, like you said, it just feels like, why is Shinzon and the Romulans using this android, and how did they come across it conveniently, and what does this
Hmm.
have to do with the main plot, other than the idea of, well, they both have mirror, evil doubles or whatever else, and plus it also gives you the way to bring back Data and without Katra or whatever you did for Spock, and so it all just reeks of like, what's this doing here? To me, anyway.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I had issues actually with before.
Mm.
I did not have issues with Data dying or his death scene, but
No.
I have issues with before.
Yeah, I'm the same, and I got emotionally affected by Data's death scene, and it was kind of like, at the time, I understood the logic. Brent Spiner, you can't keep playing an android forever if you visibly age. I want to go out, properly. But then if you're
Exactly.
gonna do it, do it. I am, instead of being like thrilled and happy about the end scene where B4's like, oh, maybe I'm gonna be, you just have this in memory. I just groaned. I was like, ugh, you've just killed
Yeah,
him off, and like 5 minutes later, you're like, but don't worry.
exactly. That was my problem. I needed Data to have this heroic death, and he had that. Saving his captain would be exactly how Data would go. Okay, so
Exactly.
that I thought was excellent. And it was so Data to do something like that. But then for them to bring him back,
I mean, they brought him back
through
3 times at this
B4,
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
with B4 was a really bad writing. Like, don't keep his memory alive that way. Not
Mm.
that way. Like, that was just not. I didn't think it was necessary
Yeah.
to do that, because as much as I love to see him on Picard as an android, no matter how much makeup and AI and special effects you do, he looks different.
But just before I move to the acting, the next section, and just a couple of things that I did like to shout out, just to show any listeners who are like, you're dismissing the movie. I did like that, again, Data's death scene was really impactful, and one of the parts of that
Yes.
is that I do appreciate that they gave Geordie a moment with him, where he's the
Yeah.
one that like opens the force field at the end, and you can kind of see in LeVar's acting that like he knows he's not coming back, and he gets that kind of unspoken send off, which is kind of beautiful in a way. So like that scene is great. And one other thing, I do really love the Vice Admiral Janeway cameo. Because I'm a huge fan of Voyager and that character, and I just love the idea that like you had to have a random admiral, and instead of casting somebody for that, it was a cool little fan thing to be like, oh, let's just use Kate Mulgrew. Why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I loved it.
I'll move us to the next section then, which is the acting, and I just have a little tiny bit of sort of behind the scenes, and then I'll kind of go around and ask us our thoughts again. Sir Patrick Stewart wrote about this movie in his memoir, Making It So, and said, Nemesis was particularly weak. I didn't have a single exciting scene to play. I don't agree with that. And the actor who portrayed the movie's villain, Shinzon, was an odd, solitary young man from London. His name was Tom Hardy. Tom wouldn't engage with any of us on a social level, never said good morning, never said good night, and spent the hours he wasn't needed on set in his trailer with his girlfriend. He was by no means hostile. it was just challenging to establish any rapport with him. On the evening Tom wrapped his role, he characteristically left without ceremony or niceties, simply walking out the door. As it closed, I said quietly to Brent and Jonathan, and there goes someone I think we shall never hear of again. It gives me nothing but pleasure that Tom has proven me so wrong. I just have to add that. So,
at least he's happy for me. He's not like, no,
he's not bitter. It's just kind of like, and like I said, Tom Hardy was going through a lot of stuff. He's mentioned like he was going through difficult like personal moments when he made this, and he was doubting his abilities as an actor and stuff. And after the response, like I said, he went back and did more acting lessons and took it really hard. So I mean, like I said, I think he's terrible in this movie, but it's the only movie of his that I can say that about him in, because every other performance I've seen him in, he's great. You know what I mean? And as DK said, when he played...
I think personally he did the best he could with the script he got,
and
the direction he got. And on top of that, he was new and he wasn't really questioning. And maybe he felt intimidated with all these legacy actors that were there from this, fandom. And maybe that's why he kind of kept to himself.
As you see, I think it's also the intimidation of the fact that you're playing an established character played by like a legendary actor. So you're feeling like I'm going to be prepared to compared to Patrick Stewart. So naturally, that's just going to overwhelm you and be like, oh, geez, this is my first role and I have to immediately up my game to Shakespearean actor renowned levels. It's going to mess up anyone. Yeah, which is perhaps why they should just have used Patrick Stewart as both roles, which again would have made the connection for the audience a lot more, I think, more realistic and more easy to believe if it was than just casting a completely different actor. I know you'd have like special effects budgets and everything, but it still might have made it more effective. Anyway, neither here nor there, I suppose. But it's just a thought, that they could have potentially given some thought to. So but I will say, I think Patrick Stewart is actually really good in the movie. I don't agree with his assessment that he had no good scenes, because, like I said, his scenes with Shinzon, I think, are really good. I mean, that scene with Crusher that DK mentioned is really good. The scenes at the wedding, he gets all of the cool little jokes and kind of friendliness, and it's nice to see this loosened up version of Picard.
Agreed.
And, I chuckle at the kind of Data, shut up, I've waited 15 years to say that kind of thing. That's kind of more of that kind of banter and stuff. Or even when he's leaving, I know it's just a kind of sexist joke and it's a bit of a trope, but when he's leaving the bridge and says, your wife would never forgive me, you have the bridge, Mr. Troy. It is kind of funny, because these are characters with this history that are just joshing each other. And I'm like, but that just disappears about, like you said, halfway through the movie, when it all just becomes grim, dark, and solemn, and it's counting down till everyone's dead, basically. Yeah. So I don't love it. But so, what did any of you guys think about the acting?
Spiner and Stewart, they're always worth a watch. Yeah. So I'm fine. I mean, I don't like B4 as much, but I do think that Spiner's acting as B4 is pretty good on part in scenes. I like the one where he's locked up in the end and he's saying why.
That scene breaks my heart. That's the only good B4 scene, but that is so powerful and heartbreaking.
Yeah, I like that one.
Have I done something wrong, and how long is indefinitely and whatever? It's
Yeah, so those two definitely. And I'm going to give a special shout out to Jonathan Frakes for just puffing himself up bigger than Hindenburg when Shinzon begins talking to Deanna in their first meeting about touching her hair.
I love that part.
You can physically see him rear up.
I have such a cool fact about Jonathan Frakes that I'd put under VFX production design, but I'm going to drop it here because it's really funny, which is that Jonathan Frakes refused to shave his back for the love scene with Troy, and the hair on his back was instead digitally removed by an effects house.
Yeah, I was shocked when I learned that, and it's actually pretty good for 2002 VFX.
It's better than Superman in Justice League with the stash. I'll give it that much.
I did not know that. I did not know that. So they did a good job, because I didn't think that. I wouldn't have thought, oh, this looks weird, Yeah.
But I mean, like you said, there's nobody really gets much else to do. The next gen cast are reliable enough, but they barely feature. And so it really is. It's Stewart and Spiner's film. Tom Hardy as a villain. Ron Perlman, as we've mentioned, who's basically wasted because we know he's capable of more than this, even in prosthetics. And like I give a shout out to Dina Meyer. I've mentioned this before, but she's an actress that I like, even though she's kind of a character actress that you probably haven't seen in a lead role. She's been in loads of other things like Starship Troopers and Saw, and Birds of Prey, the TV series, if you're me. And so I thought she was good as Donatra, but again, she didn't get nearly enough to do. And anytime it looked like she was going to get more to do, it was either a terrible scene or she was immediately just, nerfed out of the film. Like, we're going to take them on for you. Nope, never mind. We're disabled. You're on your own.
I agree. I think I would have liked to see, and that was another thing for a Romulan-based film. Not a lot of Romulan scenes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is something that was been on my mind the whole time about this movie is the fact that, we've, and again, something Rathacon does right that this movie doesn't do is that it doesn't focus as much as on how characters react and interact and grow and develop from the fallout of the villain's actions. It just more focuses on the actions themselves and never stops to think about, how that changes dynamics between either characters on the ship or between the Federation and the Romulans or anything like that.
Exactly, yeah. And I think somebody mentions it in the audience response if I've kept it, but again, it's one of those very convenient things that it's like the Enterprise E just happened to be the only ship close to Romulus that could go. How convenient that Picard's clone took over and it's his ship that's the only one that's nearby.
Exactly.
Very fortuitous.
Yeah.
Why were they so close to the border?
They went to find B4. Why he was on that planet? Who knows? The plot said so.
I mean, that's another favorite. That's another favorite standby of Star Trek is always that the Enterprise is the only one in range. They use it in the motion picture. They use it in Generations. It's always the only one in range. The only one. How many ships? We've seen how many, thanks to the Dominion War and Wolf 359. Surely there is another ship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think personally, I give credit where it's due for all the cast, especially the main cast, for really still, given what we know about behind the scenes and all of that, I would not have blamed them in the slightest for phoning it in, but they all seem very professional and still really do their best to sell everything.
Yeah. DK, you had a little bit, I think, about the direction before I move us completely away from this. So
I do.
You want to take it away with that?
Yeah. Stuart Baird, he was brought in to direct Nemesis by executive producer and everybody's favourite human being, Rick Berman. It was Baird's third film following U.S. Marshals and executive decision. Dude, you should have just finished right there. Although he had directed a variety of second units previously, Baird did not have a background in Star Trek. He was aware of the film and TV series, but did not consider himself an expert on this. You think?
Yeah.
Did not consider himself an expert on the subject.
What?
Berman explained that Baird would bring flesh blood to the film, and that Berman had enjoyed the sense of fun and action. Oh God, I can't believe this shit as I'm reading it. The sense of fun and action that existed in Executive Decision. Baird said in a promotional interview that this resulted in a non-typical Baird film. Pretty typical to me. Anyway, saying that it was perhaps a little different from the dynamics of the previous films. He wanted to add energy to the action scenes and added some set pieces, such as the car chase. He called that scene a signature piece for the film, which turns dark after the crew is put in danger by the inhabitants of the planet. He also found that the cast would discuss any issues they had with the direction he gave to their characters. Despite Frakes being in the cast and having directed the previous two Star Trek films, Baird decided not to seek his opinion on the direction of the film. He said that there was no resentment on set, noting that Frakes was completing work on directing Clockstoppers at the time, and so likely could not have taken on directing Nemesis even if Baird had not been given the job. Baird had hoped that Nemesis would be enough of a success that he could consider whether to take the lead on a future 11 Star Trek film, cue laughter. Much of the cast have been very critical since, vocally speaking of a disdain for them and the franchise, though Marina Sirtis still claims this film is better than Insurrection. And a footnote by Mike, she's wrong.
Yeah, she is wrong.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've kind of already talked about it. Obviously, Baird, not a Trek fan, wasn't really interested. Wanted to throw in things like car chases and stuff, which just has no place in a Trek film, really. And even the cast didn't get on with him. He showed them disdain. Apparently, I read somewhere he referred to LeVar Burton throughout as like Laverne or something ridiculously, dismissive.
Yeah. He apparently thought LeVar Burton was an alien. And I also hear, correct me if I'm wrong, but LeVar Burton could have, like, was in the line to possibly be in the director's chair, and that makes me personally, like, that hurts to me to think about that, because it may not have been perfect, but it certainly would have been better than what we got.
Exactly.
Yeah. Burton directed some good episodes of Trek for sure, so I didn't hear that, but I can believe it, and it would have been better. But I mean, again, everybody kind of already said, and a lot of the audience responses, like, why wouldn't you just give it to Frakes for a third time? But, you know, clearly I didn't realize that we'd miss out on the cinematic masterpiece that was Clock Stoppers if he had, so, you know.
Hey, that movie is a part of my childhood, personally. You know, I didn't even watch it because of Frakes. I just watched it because it was a Nickelodeon movie, and I watched Nick, and the premise alone sold me. But that was.
Is it more enjoyable than Nemesis?
Yeah. I mean, I will say that it is. I mean, it's definitely not a depressing. I mean, when one's about having a watch that gives you the ability to stop time, and another one is about, you know, Picard's clone being like a creepy psychopath who, you know, grows green, weird, veiny head stuff. You know, you don't even have to be a Trek fan, or like, anybody will tell you one definitely sounds more appealing than the other.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I commend you for starting a sentence with, and this film is about, and then actually trying to assign it some kind of, because what's it about? 1,000 things and nothing. I think really is the point. But yeah, I will say I forgive you for Clockstoppers, because I actually genuinely like Frakes' film Thunderbirds, but that's because I like that franchise.
I've got to be honest, I actually enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I will tell you, DK, yes, that is more fun than Nemesis.
Well, you know, I've watched episodes of Crossroads that are more fun than Nemesis, let's be fair.
But I sympathise to a very small degree with people that, like, quite rightly say, and it's true of this film, like, don't put somebody in charge who has no affection for a genre piece whatsoever.
You have to know your audience. And if you don't know the fandom, then you don't know the audience.
It's not necessarily knowing the audience, it's just not treating your audience as if they're idiots. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the problems lie in this one, because as Mike was pointing out, you know, you have things happen and you were just like, why is that happening again? Where did this come from?
Yeah. And knowing what makes a good story, because I mean, Nicholas Meyer, who directed Wrath of Khan and The Undercover Country, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was not a diehard Star Trek fan, but he clearly, when they brought him in, he clearly understands what makes a compelling story, character arcs, and whatnot, and that shows where, like, it shows that it. Like I said, you don't necessarily need to understand the lore. You just need to understand what makes good storytelling, which also Baird clearly does not, at least in the context of these characters.
I can't believe someone watched Executive Decision and then looked at that and thought, that's the man.
Yeah, but that's my point, is that, like, I think it's with Meyer, it's not that he wasn't a fan, it's that he's a fan of things that are in the DNA of Star Trek, so he wanted to...
Well, I mean, you can go back and watch things like Time After Time and recognise it as a really good movie. So you can understand the thinking behind approaching Meyer. With Baird, I just don't get the decision making, other than surely it must have been cheap.
That's my point, though, is just like it's when you try to, not just that you're not a fan, it's when you try to turn it into something that it's not, or that's not even a part of it. So, like, I think the problem here is that Baird turned it into wanted to turn it into a generic late 90s action movie. So, the kind of, well, the last couple of things I have are VFX, production design, music, and sound. So, DK, I'm going to come to you because I've kind of been abandoning you a little. So, do you have anything note-wise on these things?
It's all right. I'm living up to my avatar. Yes.
Not a merry man.
Production design. This movie, to me, it's just incredibly drab. It feels a lot like the Riemann Shinzon lighting issue is just used to disguise really lackluster sets for a lot of the time. I will point out that I will give kudos for bringing the Romulan shoulder pads out of the 80s.
I knew you were going to mention mention how the uniforms were better?
Yes. Although the foreheads are still laughable, but however miserable the Romulan costumes are, Shinzon and the Remans look fabulous.
Oh my word. Shinzon's incredible pointy shoulder pads.
That is pure.
Sashay away, Shinzon.
Exactly.
He is
Absolutely.
serving Romulus and Remus realness, girl.
They're working those uniforms.
Yeah, like honestly, like can we recut that like seeing his Shinzon's introduction with just like, work it, girl, give it twirl.
let's have Shinzon walk in catwalk style and have that be what causes them all to just melt.
Exactly.
Oh wow!
Have him walk down the steps really provocatively. That would just look fantastic.
Oh, that honestly would make this movie like his big death scene where it's like Shinzon of Remus. I could never get your amazing costumes shins off my mind, and you never forget that. Now, sashay away.
The outfits need help. I mean, definitely the uniforms of the Romulan has been needing help since the beginning of time.
I mean, that enough times in this series.
Yeah, it's become a drinking game at this point.
Yeah, they're really just bad, and they look uncomfortable. They don't look efficient for military.
I have a very quick note about the VFX production design then, which is that aside from the explosions, the ramming of the scimitar that we've mentioned by the Enterprise was not computer generated. The filming crew ran a model of the forward saucer into a model of the scimitar, shot it in slow motion, and hung it upside down to give the illusion of the hull flotsam drifting in space, which might be, I think, why it's so effective, because I always really love model work. I think it's more tangible. But no, I mean, I will say I think there's some things that are quite clever. I like that we see Remus as the first thing in the movie to kind of give you the hint of that. And I love that the Romulan, even though probably is a CGI version, it's based on the kind of map painting from Unification, the view of like Romulus's city capital, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
That looks really cool. And I was actually really disturbed by the use of the weapon in that opening scene when I first saw this, partly because I wasn't feeling well anyway. I mentioned off air to DK I had like a winter flu. So opening the scene that way, it did make me feel quite disturbed and sick, I will say, because that wasn't so pleasant watching them all melt into nothing. I like the scimitar, as I said. I like the new Romulan warbirds, the ship ramming scene. That's about all I can say about the VFX production design, unless anybody wants to add anything. Nope.
No. Once I got past the Romulans' outfits, that were about it for me.
That's fair enough. They do look a lot more TOS influenced and kind of better, so I'll give you that.
Exactly.
I'll just quickly talk about the music and sounding. What can you really say? Serviceable, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I actually think it's very fitting and nice. I don't know what the name of the track is, but I think it's like, you hear it a lot during Scimitar where it's like that, dun, 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 or, dun, like, I'm not sure if I'm not...
I think that's the thing. It's like the 5-note kind of menacing theme for Shinzon and the Scimitar are nearby. And that's kind of something that he came up with, which is, it's distinct, I guess, but... Yeah, not really a lot else to say.
Yeah.
It wasn't very memorable. One thing about Star Trek is it has memorable music.
Oh yeah, a lot of the TOS films. Yeah.
I mean, when a Klingon scene is about to happen, like, that's very distinct kind of music. And I felt that what they chose for the Shinzon was it needed to be a little bit more ominous. I don't think it was ominous enough. I think it was a little too peppy.
It was maybe a bit subtle because I didn't notice it. And fair play if you did, Justin. But for me, I was just kind of like, I didn't really notice anything other than the sort of standard Trek fare and blue skies. So.
Oh yeah. I personally like the music used in the Battle of the Basin Rift. Like I like a lot of the underscoring of that personally. Like that. Okay. I mean, that's probably the only part of the music that really just thinking, going over the movie in my brain, that's probably one of the only tracks that or parts of the score that really stood out to me. But I don't know. I think that part of the movie's well composed, in my opinion.
Okay, cool.
It wasn't until the credits were rolling I thought, oh, is this actually Jerry Goldsmith?
It was one of his last scores.
Yeah, that is sad.
Mm. But
when you look at things like First Contact, and that is just so memorable. And
look at the DS9 and Voyager themes.
Yeah, so great. There's pieces of music, and then everything about this just screams mediocre, and it's a shame. Yeah.
With that all done, then we're going to move to our conclusion and a score out of 5 stars. And again, give the guests a chance to gather their thoughts because they may not have known about this coming. So, do you want to start us off, DK, or?
Yeah, I'll go for it. Yeah, I don't hate this, but I can fully appreciate why others do. It's clunky. It throws everything against the wall in the hope that something will stick. It has the laziest plotting, incredibly strange, in parentheses, bad directing choices in places, and it features the Romulans. And after everything in the show, it is pretty much, for me, the capstone to their dreary form of shadiness. They're everything stereotypical in the franchise concerning this race. And yet, weirdly enough, I do have a kind of affection for this, despite everything. It's certainly not the worst movie I've ever seen, though, let's be honest, for me, that's a low bar. It does remind me of a time in my life where Trek wasn't only a passion, but it was a lifeline when I felt very much alone in my life, and for that I will forever be grateful to this one. Having said that, I've sat down and watched Star Trek 5 10 times more than I have this over the years, so make of that what you will. And I've given it 3.
Oh, wow, okay. 3 out of 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's come on, it's Trek. The worst Trek is better than a lot of other things.
I'm probably going to go next so that we can at least end on a high, I suspect, because I've got a feeling the other two will probably score higher than me. So I'll just say, where do I start? There's a lot wrong with this movie. While I don't doubt that franchise fatigue is responsible for at least some of the negative response, there are very definitely things that just don't work and problems that seem impossible to ignore. The script is a mess, with Data's subplot seemingly shoehorned in to satiate Spiner's desire for his glorious Spock moment. The villain motivations flip-flop depending on the script's need at any given time. We have very little to do with the Romulans, and the new things we do get suck, looking at you, Nosferatu Remans. Several good actors are wasted, and Tom Hardy gives a performance with enough ham and cheese to make Subway jealous, though a fair amount of that is due to the writing he's given. The director's disdain for Star Trek comes through also with a rather phoned-in feel and too many scenes that just look awful, from lighting to cinematography to staging. It's not all a complete disaster, though. I can see why there are people that like this. Stewart, Spiner, and the Next Gen cast give great performances. There are individual acting showcase moments that are brilliant, captivating, and emotive. The ending, too, really hit me emotionally and is one thing that does work for me, along with the ship effects, space battles, and the glorious Janeway cameo. In the end, though, this was and is just such a disappointment for me. Very definitely a contender for worst Trek movie, and I'm grateful that it wasn't the end of the Next Generation story after all. And I actually gave it 1.5 stars out of 5.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Painful.
Ouchies.
And we'll come to you next, Nita, I think, and ask if you've got a conclusion and a score of 5 stars for us.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I like that they started the new chapter of Riker's life and Deanna's life, which I felt was a long time coming. I mean, I know that he was number one favorite, but I think they could have included him as a captain of a different ship alongside the Enterprise somehow and moved him along. I think keeping him there for 15 years made him the longest running first officer. And I don't know. It did. I thought it was great that they gave him this. They ended the what we thought would be the ending. You know, the closure of TNG with him moving on and them being married. I thought ending Data was actually a good thing because I felt like they needed to bring closure to Data's life because, you know, the actor isn't an android. And I thought that him going heroically, saving his captain would be the way he would do it. And I love the cameos with Janeway. She was fantastic. I love the interaction in the dinner scene with Shinzon and uh, Captain Picard, and I thought that it was very intense, very I thought it was very emotional to see the same person with two different lives, and having these two different viewpoints in life. You know, if you would take road A, this is what your thought process would be. If you take road B, here's what your thought process would be. So I like that. Overall, I did enjoy the movie. You know, and I'm actually going to give it a 4.
Wow, okay.
4 stars.
That's cool. I'm glad we've got people that kind of represent both sides, so it doesn't feel like I'm just basically crapping on it and
No,
not
not
giving
at
it a
all.
fair shake. But yeah, I agree with a lot of your points as well, to be fair. So yeah. And so Justin, we come to you last then. What did you think of the film and a score out of 5, please?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, yeah, it's easily not the best Trek movie, but I mean, I also, like, there's a lot of very solid premises and ideas going on, as well as a few tired and, you know, as was mentioned, inappropriate ones, and there's a few moments where it ends up becoming more than the sum of its parts. So, you know, but like it's not without its bright spots. And so, I mean, all in all, I think as has been said, you know, like, you know, there is like Trek is still better than other things. Like, I mean, I would never go so far as to say it's almost like, you know, The Room or the Cats movie or something like that. Like, it's definitely, it's not that type of, like, I wouldn't say, like, I couldn't even, like, you know, if this was like a essay I had to grade, I would give it maybe like, you know, a D- or something like that, because I still see it passes for me, but it, you know, still like has clear areas of improvement in that. And like I said, it's got, you know, some thrilling action, and, you know, at the end of the day, for me, like, I'm just happy to be with these characters doing almost anything. So, I mean, I'm grateful just for that in that regard. So it all balances out, I would say, to a 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're basically in agreement with DK on that one. That's fair enough.
Yeah, basically.
Cool. Well, like I said, that's a kind of a fair assessment, I think, for everyone. In any case, I add the scores together and divide by the 4 of us here to give us our final score for Star Trek Nemesis, and Star Trek Nemesis gets a final score of 2.9 out of 5. So, yeah, I mean, a couple of us gave it a 3, and it's virtually there. So I think that's, you know, I did a little tiny bit of rounding up. It was actually 2.875, but, you know, we'll round it up to a 2.9. Why not? I think that makes the most sense. And yeah, that's probably the fairest. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to come to each of you individually. So, Nita, where can people find you around the internet, and, of course, the Sci-Fi Queens podcast?
Just look me up in Sci-Fi Queens. We are podcast streams on YouTube, so it's Sci-Fi Queens. Just
It's a
literally
good
that
watch,
you
I'll
can
say that.
find us. Thank you. You can find us on you can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. We're kind of everywhere, and on YouTube is where our podcast airs.
Fantastic. And I believe you're joining us again on the Silver Screen podcast in a few weeks to review Planet of the Apes.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Look forward to that one. Justin, what about you? Do you want to shout out where people can find you on the internet, or is it more of a, you know, avoiding people situation?
Oh yeah, like I said, if you haven't already blocked me because of what I've said about Star Wars fans, you can find me on the Meta apps, or the, you know, the threads and Instagrams at Justin Avery Smith, or the non-Meta ones, because even before the buyout, Twitter wouldn't let me use my full name because of character limits, so it had to be at Just a Very Smith, you know, because that's what I am. I am just a very Smith. You know,
I love that.
And that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, hey, you know, innovations can flourish given restrictions, and that sort of thing. Oh, but that same thing on like the Blue Sky and TikTok. It's the same thing. So if Mark Zuckerberg owns it, it's Justin Avery Smith. If Mark Zuckerberg doesn't own it, just a very Smith.
Cool, awesome. And DK, you still having fun in that cave?
Yeah. Screw social media.
You can just find DK on the podcast. It's the one time he crawls out and talks to other humans.
No, I do occasionally join in on Facebook, so I am there, but only for people that I add.
Fair enough. And again, I'll have something on screen that will mention all the places that you can find our podcast, whether it be Hit or Miss Star Trek or Silver Screen podcast, depending on what you're watching. I won't go through them all, but you can always find them in the episode descriptions of wherever you're watching or listening. We have a link tree with them all there. And as I say, if you are watching on YouTube, you can see that banner thing that I've made that has them all handily available there for you. So you can always pause if you're stuck and write them down from there as well. So yeah, the epic words of Arnie, we'll be back.
I'll be back. You've been listening to the Silver Screen Podcast, hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Produced and edited by Mike Wilson. Additional material and behind-the-scenes sections by DK. Follow us on social media. Links to all of our social media pages can be found via the Linktree page listed in the episode's description. This podcast is part of the Mike's Podcast Network. You can listen to this and our sister podcasts on all good podcast providers by searching for Silver Screen Podcast or Mike's Podcasts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share far and wide. Thank you for joining us. Come back next time for more movie magic, and hopefully this can be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Cut!